President Trump told reporters Bill Pulte will not be his permanent choice anyway for Director of National Intelligence after appointing him to the role in an acting capacity earlier this week. Pulte has no experience in national security or intelligence, but the president says the current head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency still is qualified for the job and revealed the reason behind his interim appointment.
Why do you think, Mr. President, he's the best person for the job?
Well, he's very smart. He's a person who's got high integrity. He's done a phenomenal job at Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. You probably have $1 trillion in value there. When he took over, it was much less. And I guess I'm responsible for that, too, because everybody wanted me to sell it in my first term for 10% of what it's worth right now. And it's an acting position. It's not a permanent. He's not going to be permanent because, I don't think he'd want to be permanent. But he's a very smart guy, and he may find out some things about the rigged elections, et cetera, et cetera. I think he'd like to do it. I think he wants to do it very much. Got a lot of energy. But he'll be very good. Again, it's not a permanent position. Right. We're interviewing people right now, but it's somebody just to take it over for a little while.
Does he have the necessary, in your view, Mr. President, the necessary national security experience to take on that position?
Well, I do, and I think he does, actually, because he's smart, because a lot of national security. I wasn't greatly experienced in national security, and I think I've done a really great job with it. A lot of people would say that. I've ended 8 wars, and soon to be a 9th. I hope that works out, too, Frankly, probably, and there's another one also. It could be 10. No president, I don't think a president's ended 1 war having to do with outside of this country. So, we've done a good job. I would say that Bill is a guy that will be able to figure it out very quickly. Again, it's short term, but he may be very effective for a short period of time.
There's a lot in there. Let's bring in investigative reporter for the New York Times, Michael Schmidt, and MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Delaney. And guys, good morning. Mike, I'll start with you. As usual, the president kind of just out loud gives away the game and saying he wants Bill Pulte there to look at what he still believes are rigged elections, talking about 2020. We assume, obviously, it was not rigged. We can go through the litany of reasons why, including all those 62, 63 court losses for the president around that election. So what is Bill Pulte's role? We've heard Todd Blanche was going to be acting attorney general until he wasn't, until Donald Trump decided he wanted to be the attorney general. So we'll see where this goes. But why is Bill Pulte there? You've been covering this sort of retribution beat for the last year and a half.
The reason that Bill Pulte is there is exactly why the president said, and which is that he wants him to go in and find whatever he can in the intelligence community to back up the claim about the 2020 election. And the reason that he sent Bill Pulte to that position is that Pulte has shown himself to be very willing to follow through on the president's retribution campaign. He worked behind the scenes to move forward the cases on Letitia James. He complained to the president about how the U.S. attorney's offices across the country were dealing with the investigations into James Comey, claiming that those needed to be moving forward more quickly. We know that those 2 cases are things that Trump dearly cared about and has pushed himself. So Pulte showed himself as willing to use his position in the administration to advance the retribution campaign. And Trump has been open, and the reporting has shown that Trump is disappointed with the speed that some of his officials have moved forward with on issues like the retribution. He was upset with Pam Bondi because although to much of the world she had done everything that Trump wanted, she had not done enough to follow through on what he wanted. And there were similar feelings that he had about Gabbard. So this is, sometimes the president is incredibly transparent about things. And here he said it out loud.
Ken, obviously the Intelligence Committee was a little bit shocked, and you know better than anybody, when Tulsi Gabbard was sent into Georgia, the director of national intelligence sent to the state of Georgia and Fulton County to get things around the election 2020 a couple months back and pull them back into Washington. So what has been the reaction to this appointment of Bill Pulte in the Intelligence Committee? He will oversee 18 intelligence agencies with his primary objective seeming to be, to go after conspiracy theories about an election 6 years ago.
Yes, Willie, even in an environment where people are prepared for jaw-dropping personnel announcements by Donald Trump, this one stood out. And people were just, that I spoke to, were just horrified by this. In fact, Mark Warner, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, rushed to John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, and basically told him that they're not going to get FISA renewal, that important surveillance tool that's up for renewal in a few days. There won't be Democrats voting for that if Pulte is the DNI, and that may explain why it went from appointing him DNI to he's only in a temporary acting position, because that wasn't initially announced that way. But nonetheless, even however long he serves in this role is too long for most professional intelligence officials, because he has no foreign policy experience, no intelligence experience. And as Mike laid out very well, his main qualification seems to be excellence at retribution. The last time I was paying attention to Bill Pulte was several months ago when we did a story about how the Justice Department and Todd Blanche was looking into whether he was improperly using private investigators, private parties, to gather information about Adam Schiff's mortgage and Letitia James' dealings with banks. Apparently that didn't go anywhere. And in fact, Donald Trump was probably thrilled that he was doing that because now he's been rewarded with this just unimaginable appointment.
And it's worth saying again, it's right there in the law that DNI is supposed to have extensive intelligence community experience. He, of course, does not. Sam, your employer, The Bulwark, has a new piece digging into Pulte's past titled "Bill Pulte was a degenerate buffoon. Now he's head of U.S. intelligence." It details how he was deeply involved in meme stock culture, specifically with the company Bed Bath & Beyond, taking extraordinary and often ridiculous lengths to promote it. Sam, tell us more about this degenerate buffoon.
Well, I just want to be clear about the word degenerate in that headline. It's in quotation marks because that's Bill Pulte describing himself as degenerate. Okay, we were not besmirching Bill Pulte. That's the adjective he used for himself. And it just goes to underscore how radical this post is. We're not talking about a gig he had 20 years ago before he went into national security or intelligence. As we've established, he never had that experience. This was 3 years ago. Bill Pulte had been pushed out of his family business. He was now a sort of promoter of meme stocks. Basically, he was trying to find companies that were struggling on the brink of bankruptcy with incredibly damaged stock portfolios, and then pump them up and basically ride the wave and then get out. And one of those stocks was Bed Bath & Beyond. Lemire, that's your favorite store. You probably know about it very well. But for everyone else, that's the home goods store where you can buy a bunch of home goods. And he would go on these podcasts. He would go on these shows. They were absurd spectacles where people would present sexual objects as rewards to people who were in the audience. And he got presented himself a trophy with a little T-Rex on top of it. And he had this Taylor Swift song that was his theme song. Again, this is all very clownish behavior. And it wouldn't matter so much if not for the fact that he's now being pushed to be one of our chief intelligence officers. But look, it's comical, obviously, but I think what we're getting at is it's also quite serious in that his main qualification for the job is that he's willing to dig into the perceived foes of Donald Trump, find behavior that he can try to use against him and weaponize against him. If you're the head of the DNI, that's alarming, especially because Trump is openly saying we want to meddle in the elections. Let me just end on this. Trump has said, well, this is just a temporary position. Trust me, I'll get him out. This is sort of a pattern now. This is also the same with the weaponization fund, which there was action on that last night. But Trump has basically been like, look, he sends Todd Blanchard. He's like, look, we're not going to do this fund. It's dead. You have my word. Trump's saying, look, Pulte's not going to be there. He's just temporary. You have my word. Pulte could serve in that position for over 200 days by law, by statute. That brings you to the tail end after the election. And I think that's kind of by design.
And no one has any confidence that if Donald Trump suddenly decides that he wants to make Pulte the full-time DNI, that the Senate Republicans will do anything to stand in his way of that.